by Rachael Herron, and I'm so excited to have you here, Rachael.
Hi, Marie. It's so fun to see you. Are you going to tell them about the last time we saw each other?
I know it is, honestly, we only saw each other in February, and boy, hasn't the world changed since we caught up then.
100% change. But the best part of seeing you in February for me, this was at Stitches West. And I just walked past this beautiful woman who was giving a presentation. And I looked at her and I thought, that just looks like exactly like Marie. That is Marie's doppelganger. And then I heard your accent, and there is no doppelganger with a Kiwi accent that I know.
I know, it was the funniest thing. I finished and then I hear this, Marie, Marie. It's like,
it was such a treat. And I hadn't known you were coming this year. And I didn't know, I basically, every year I go to Stitches on one day and I just wander around and say hi to people. And that's what I do. And I just got to see you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic. And it was so lucky to be able to get that in before everything just went completely crazy. So it's really wonderful. Now, welcome to everybody as they come in. It is so good to see everyone here. Now, if anybody has any questions at all for Rachael, do feel free to ask them in the comments as we go through, and we will get them to her. And I don't know, hopefully you're able to see them as well from your side, but failing that, I can always pop them up on screen.
I can see the chat. I see Jeanette and Shelley and Robin.
Excellent. Perfect. That's ideal. But well, you and I mean, gosh, we met for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago now. It could be longer, maybe 6 years ago when you came to New Zealand.
Yeah, it was probably 6 or 7 years. Maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, so the last time I was, because I'm also a Kiwi.
Yes.
Dual citizenship. But that was the first time I'd ever brought my wife back to New Zealand. And it was on a book tour. And it was so fun. It was so fun to see you. And it was kind of this book/yarn tour.
Yes, it was heaps of fun. And it was really exciting because I know for me, I came down because at that stage I think you were about halfway through the Cypress Hollow series, which is what how a lot of knitters were introduced to your work, and I know that I was one that was a huge fan. And then since then your work has proceeded. So why don't you start with who you are, what that New Zealand connection is, and how your writing career is sort of because there is no such thing as an overnight success, and I know that this has been a journey for you.
It has been. I always wanted to be a writer, but I got my master's of fine arts in writing, and then I proceeded to not know how to write a book. I didn't know how to do this at all. So I spent a long time just working and trying to write a book, completely failing. It wasn't until I found National Novel Writing Month, which is this online lark where you tell a story in the month of November. You write a book in the month of November. And I thought, well, that'll be fun to try. I have to write fast, and I love knitting. Like, I was born a New Zealand knitter. My grandmother's from Methven, and my mother's raised on a Kiwi sheep farm, and my people are all still sheep farmers. And so I decided to write this love story about a sheep farmer, and it became the first book I sold in a 3-book series to HarperCollins and to Random House Australia, because publishers kind of separate these things. So in America, it was called How to Knit a Love Song, and in Australia and New Zealand, it was called Eliza's Gift. That's what it was, Eliza's Gift. They all have different names and different covers, so that can be super confusing. But I wrote you have it right there, Eliza's Gift. Look at her with her cowboy hat. I was so dismayed by that particular cowboy hat when I saw that cover, but it sold really well, and I love that cover now. So thanks for holding that up, Marie. And so I just went on to write these knitting romances. I wrote 5 of them and a novella, and really drawing on everything I knew about knitting from, I started writing at about the same time I started knitting. I was about 5 at the same. I learned to read when I was 3 because I was precocious and annoying, and my mother told me stop asking her to read books, and I realized I could parse the symbols. But at about 5, I started writing and knitting, and those 2 things have always been so integrally linked for me. And it's interesting, Marie, that there are so many knitters in publishing. I know knitters at every level in publishing, it all, agents and editors and publishers, and I think it's because we are used to, as crafters, we're used to showing up to something. I don't even have one within reach. Usually I have knitting within reach. Putting in a few stitches. And if you do that every day for a long time, you end up with a sweater or a blanket or whatever it is you're making. And it's the same thing with books. You cannot sit down and write a book in a day or a week, but if you just keep sitting down and adding words to it and then revising those words, you end up with a book. So since then, my first book came out in 2010. And in the last 10 years, I have written or published 26 books. I just finished my 27th last week and sent it to my publisher. I have switched into, so since then I've written romance, I've written memoir, nonfiction about writing. I've written a bunch of mainstream women's fiction literature kind of stuff about families. Knitting often sneaks into the sides of those things, but I just went into thriller. This is
I haven't read that yet, and I'm itching to try it. I think it's going to be because I have to admit, when you switched from sort of knitting, sort of easy romance literature into those other stories, you could see that was part of your journey. I mean, I think we'll head down on that path in a little bit, but just staying with Cypress Hollow, I mean, one of the things I know as a reader of that, like for me, I'm a really diverse reader. I read everything. But what I love about those books is they're like a comfortable old pair of slippers that you can slip into and enjoy. And I think for like the times that we're in at the moment, it's what I call comfort reading. There's comfort knitting and there's comfort reading, and the characters are really likable, and the characters that you just love and you identify with. And I could tell that you'd spent time, particularly in the first book, in Eliza's Gift, you'd spent time in New Zealand, because there were characters there that were not just probably an atypical American rancher, but certainly typical New Zealand farmers. And I grew up on a farm too, and I was like, yep.
Yes, my family still raise sheep and deer. And deer farming is not something that happens in America. People do not understand when you talk about that here. But that's so nice of you to say. And that is one of my favorite things that people say about those particular books, the Cypress Hollow books, is that they are comforting and reassuring and warm. And I love that. So thank you for saying that.
No, well, because I think with reading, sometimes, I mean, we read for a whole variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's for entertainment, but sometimes it is actually for comfort and to be just mentally transported away somewhere else, just for a small vignette of time. And at the moment, I mean, we're all craving that, aren't we? So
it's the only thing I want to read lately is romance or comforting. What did I just read? This beautiful book called The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is about, it's a fantasy. It's got like little dragons running around in it, and that's not my usual thing, but it's the most comforting book I've ever read. And I was living in it because it's exactly what we need right now. So I just wanted to say hi to Glynis. She said, I bought your book, went overseas a good while ago, met you, and you signed it for me. Thanks, Glynis. That's so lovely. And hello to everybody. I'm trying to kind of keep my eye on comments as we go.
So once you started with the Cypress Hollow series. Now explain to people, because you're writing, I mean, once you got that first book published and you actually realized, oh my Lord, I am now a published writer and I can actually do this. I mean, you had this really interesting day job that, in terms of, it wasn't your typical 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job. So it actually kind of, in a way, left you with no excuses to continue writing, but it also gave you plenty of material to continue with writing.
That's the thing. So I worked 911. I worked for the first 7 years of my career. I worked 911 for police, fire, and medical. And I honestly got really, really tired with the police calls, because 90% of the people who call the police are usually calling because they don't want to interact with another human being and they want the police to do it for them. 10% of the time it's emergencies. But when you work for fire and medical, 100% of the time it's emergencies. And I love doing that. So for the last 10 years of my 17-year 911 career, I was just fire and medical, giving the CPR instructions, birthing babies. What that did was I worked really, really long hours. On the day jobs that I had, I would work between 12 and 18 hours on a shift. But then by the time I left, my last 5 years, I actually lived in the firehouse. So we worked 48-hour shifts, which meant that we had 4 days off. So I would work 2 days on, 4 days off. 2 days on, 4 days off. And it's a really ideal schedule for a writer, because I had the time to write, and I couldn't give myself the excuse that I had no time to write, which is always an excuse. And like you said, I took the job because I didn't want to teach, and I really wanted a job that had two things that might that I could leave behind at the end of the day, that I couldn't take home and work on. Like I saw a lot of my friends working nights and overtime, for free. I didn't want that. And when you take the headset off of 911, somebody else is going to answer 911. It's not going to be you when you're at home, which is great. And the other thing is I wanted this window on the human condition. And I thought to myself that perhaps answering 911 would give me those windows on the human condition and help me hear what love sounds like in every language and what pain sounds like in every language. And it really, really did. I was right in that guess. And I've heard hundreds of thousands of the very first few minutes of the worst day of a person's life. Yeah. And that is such an honor and such a gift to be able to be the first responder helping in that way. But it also leaves you with a real sense of incompletion, because, we have really strong HIPAA legal protection of your medical records in America for good reason. But what that actually means is that not even the firefighters can find out what happened to the baby that they transported. The dispatcher, I cannot tell what happened with the baby who I gave the CPR instructions for 14 minutes until the paramedics got on scene. I'm not legally entitled to that information, which is fine. Every once in a while we'd hear about it in gossip from maybe a nurse or something, but we weren't supposed to. But what that meant was that I had a lot of stories in my head that needed closure.
Yeah.
So every single story I write now is informed by what I learned. Pack Up the Moon, which was a pretty dark mainstream fiction book that I wrote, was directly from a call that I never really got over. And I couldn't get over it until I wrote this fictional story about it, completely fictionalized everything. No one would recognize it, but put an ending onto it, proper ending. Yeah. So it was a great job. And for the last 4 years, I've been able to afford to write full time, which is what I'd always dreamed of.
But I think that's the really nice thing I think that you touch on, is the fact that you're able to actually complete stories. And when you work as a 911 operator like that, as you said, you're often with somebody in the first few moments of the worst day of their lives. And you often get to see, I think so much now, and I think this is where this COVID crisis is now going to take us, is that we now have a situation where we are, we've seen so much superficial going on in the world. Everything has been very, very superficial. And now all of a sudden, when you pull together in a crisis, you can actually start stripping back layers of personalities and families, and actually realizing that relationships are complicated, lives are messy, and emotions are messy, and there is no one size fits all to any situation whatsoever. And you in a way had a very small vignette into that, which you're actually then able to translate into stories which all of us can then share, which I think is incredibly valuable. The one book which you went to series fiction, I'm just going to flick the screen back up so we can both see a little more. Is the ones that matter the most, and in this one here, you've got a central character whose husband dies very, very suddenly, and then all of a sudden, once he passed, you find out secrets. I'm not going to let too much be given away, but secrets about that person that you didn't know that was there, and then that opens up in an entire another world. And that's just it. There are layers and complications and all of those things that are there, and I think people are able to grasp onto those different things. And actually, I found the characters in this incredibly engaging.
I love
those
characters. And that book originally came from the fact that I would often hear, men pass, they wake up, their wife wakes up, the men are too far gone, the CPR is not going to help them, so there's no use in me doing CPR. So I stay on the phone with this woman who has just lost her husband. And this woman would so often say to me in those minutes before the paramedics get there, the thing she would always say is, I don't know I don't know where the money is. I don't know the passwords. I don't know anything. So I kept thinking about this fictional woman, what if he dies? What if she's young and he has a life that she never knew?
Mm.
So yeah, I like to do that kind of thing. And also I think the 911 gig really helped me in not being scared of scary subjects.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
And
helpful as a writer.
and death is also one of those things that people will often not talk about. Like I know, like for me, I know particularly with the ones that matter the most, what I identified with that was the fact that when I read that, for us, I actually talked about this in the quarantine diaries earlier on, but we had a situation when I was in my early adult life where my mother and aunt found out. Well, they found out when I was in my late teens after the passing of my grandparents, that they found out that they had a brother who was adopted out during the war. And so then when I was in my early 20s, it really bothered my mother for a long, long time. And so by the time I was sort of in my early 20s, I said to my mum, well, let's just try and find him. And we did. And for him, he didn't even know he was adopted until his parents had died. So could you imagine for him to not only discover at the passing of your parents that actually your parents, well, so that they were your parents, they weren't your birth parents, and then he then went to go and find out, he got encouraged from his wife to say, well, actually your birth parents might still be alive. And when he went to go and get his application and his birth certificate, everything that was there, he not only got handed a birth certificate, but he got handed a letter from us saying, hey, we've been looking for you.
He got handed a family.
He got handed a family, and he was adopted as an only child. He married a woman who was an only child, and then he, there's I'm called a Māori. There's a lot of Māori in my family. He's quite dark. He could never quite figure out. He was a little bit different, and he couldn't quite figure it out. And then all of a sudden, he got handed this incredible history and family and all of those sorts of things.
I have goosebumps everywhere. This is
and it's quite, but those are the sorts of secrets. There were a lot of secrets. I know, particularly in our parents' generation.
Yeah.
Where today we were a lot more open and free about things. But boy, it's amazing. Sometimes you don't have to scratch very far for the surface to actually find out where the real stuff is hidden.
And things like 23andMe now are really opening up and expanding so many of those things. I have so many friends, direct friends, firsthand telling me, I found my twin sister. I never knew I had a twin sister, and it's a twin, those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. Yeah, it's really exciting to write about.
Yeah, it is. So what? So Stolen Things. Stolen Things is the new book. Talk us through Thriller. This is a new place for you.
This one was really special to me. So this is Stolen Things. It's out in hardcover now. It'll come out in paperback in August. And I think you all can get it on Book Crossing pretty easily. It never got picked up by an Australian, New Zealand publisher. So Penguin was selling it there, but limited basis. So I don't know how that works. I think you can get it on Amazon or something. But I'd always wanted to write the 911 thriller, right? Because I had so much experience of being in that world, but I couldn't do it when I worked for a 911 agency because automatically the press, if they looked at it, would look and see, is she writing about this agency?
Yeah.
I couldn't do that safely. But I always said, when it didn't work there, I would write a 911 thriller. So this thriller is about a woman who is a dispatcher. I finally got to write the 911 dispatcher story. She's been a dispatcher for a number of years. Her daughter is 16, and one early evening, Lori, our main character, picks up 911, and it is her daughter on the other end of the line. And her daughter says, help me. And she doesn't know where she is. So mom has to figure out where she is. And I'm not giving anything away when I say that her daughter has been roofied, possibly raped. Her best friend is missing, and there's a dead man in the closet next to her. And that's how the story starts. And it's about local police corruption that we have here. There was an actual incident called that's known as the dispatcher's daughter. This young woman in Oakland, where I live, was sexually trafficked by 3 different police departments in our area as a minor. They kind of like swapped her around, and she was actually the daughter of a dispatcher. So I kept thinking about this woman who had to keep going back to work after her daughter has been sexually abused by these men that she works with, and she has to keep going back. She's got to get her paycheck and stuff, but how does she also fight for justice for her daughter?
Mm.
So it's very different. Many of the things have changed, and it's not really recognizable, and it's set in a fictional town, but it's definitely set from within the police department. The main character's husband is the police chief. She's the dispatcher, and this is their daughter. So yeah, that was fun to write. Yep.
So in terms of what you enjoy writing, what do you enjoy writing the most? I mean, because you've done lots of really what I would call sort of dime store type romances, which you covered with the fires. I mean, are you writing, are those now published and released under your own name? Because I know they were under a nom de plume for a long time.
Interesting. The nom de plume ones were just to make money, just to write romance and make money. But they did so well and people liked them so much that my Australian publisher, Random House, or is it HarperCollins? I've had so many different publishers now. I think it was Random House. They wanted me to write more in that world, in the Darling Bay world, which is not the Cypress Hollow. So Darling Bay is a beach town. Cypress Hollow is the yarn town. Yeah. So they wanted more in Darling Bay, which was under the nom de plume. So I moved all the nom de plume books over into my own name, and then I kept writing for them. So I've written a couple of series for Random House Australia, but then I self-published it the rest of the world. So they published it in Australia and New Zealand. They had the rights for that, which was kind of the ideal world. Like I got the professional editing and the help with everything there. And then all I had to do is Americanize the spelling, take out a few U's and do that to publish everywhere else. So that's kind of how some of those series have done. The Ballard Brothers series was just mine. It wasn't sold anywhere. It was all self-published because you tend to make more money on the cover price when you self-publish. So that was a series of 3 books that I did all by myself. But honestly, I kind of burned out on romance. And I'm taking a little bit of a break because I'd always written straight romance, and I am not straight. I'm married to a woman. So I don't know.
Which to me, I always found to be one of the ultimate ironies. But there you go.
Well, apparently my sex scenes are very hot and very believable, and I do like to think of it. To be frank, it's because I do know how to love a woman, right? Yeah. But in a very funny moment, one time, I think my wife had read my 3rd book, and we were driving in San Francisco, and she said something to me. She goes, Are you sure you want to be with a woman? Because the way you write about those men is really compelling. And I'm like, I'm sure it's a fantasy. I'm just writing what is in my head. But I almost fell out of the car.
Oh, that's when you needed to say to her, but darling, I was thinking of you.
And I did.
The female character.
And I did. So, and it's always been easier for me to write from the male perspective too, from the male point of view, because I think when I'm writing from a female point of view, I get myself all confused in that first draft. And I just sent the 2nd thriller to my agent and editor last week, and I just got a few notes back from my agent today, and she says, I think this character sounds too much like you. You're gonna have to draw that back a bit, like change her a little bit. And I'm like, I know, I always have to, but when you're writing from a male point of view, I'm just writing that character from scratch, and it's just so fun. I don't have to deal with any of my own interior normal hangups,
Oh, that sounds really. So you're obviously going through that editing stage at the moment. When is that 2nd book likely to hit the shelves?
It got pushed because of COVID-19, and because of our screamingly terrifying election coming up in the fall. Definitely don't want any more Trump. We all hate him, but somehow he's still in control. So they don't basically publish. I'm with Penguin, and nobody wants books coming out around the time of the election. So it got pushed to spring of next year because nobody's going to be reading books at least in America. They're not going to be. We're all going to be glued with horror to the television.
Well, that will definitely be. The book will be something to look forward to. That's for sure. Yes. So that would be good. Now, one of the questions that I have is Audible. I know that I have sort of stumbled across a few. You've started cropping up in Audible selections. Now, how's that come about?
Good. I've always had Audible done for all of my books, except for a couple of the smaller series. But Audible just hasn't, until the last couple of years, about 2 or 3 years ago, Audible, the audio sector of books started to grow the fastest in any other sector in publishing. And it's because we all have our cell phones. Oh, look, there's the new cover of Stolen Things for the paperback. We all have them within reach. So we have these amazing, I'm old enough to remember books on tape, right?
Yeah.
And then we had books on CD, and now we have books in our pocket. So audio is becoming more popular, and I love the audio narrator that I had, particularly for the Darling Songbird series. She's a genius. I actually narrated my own book called Fast Draft Your Memoir, which is a class I teach at Stanford. And that was really fun to do, to learn how to do it. I set up a recording studio in our bedroom by nailing the mattress toppers, those foam mattress toppers, to the wall.
Reverberation to the walls, yeah. I've actually done some voiceover narration, so I can appreciate, where you go.
It's a lot of work.
It's a huge amount of work. I mean, I don't know, a lot of my people probably don't know, but I spent the back half of my 20s working in radio and broadcasting. So I have done some audible narrations, and not so much in books, but certainly a lot of voiceover work. And it is a lot of work.
And it's physically taxing.
Yeah, and also consistency and continuity and inflection and spacing and breathing and all of those sorts of things that you don't necessarily consider when you're doing them. And then also diction, and which, I've got such a heavy New Zealand accent that that's all gone out the window now. But yeah,
you have a beautiful New Zealand accent. I used to only get my accent when I was either drunk or too sleepy, and now I don't drink. So now it's only when I'm too sleepy my wife will say that I'm starting to say things funny.
So it's great though that because, like, for me, I found Audible. I always used to do a mixture between both paper books and Audible books, and I was an early adopter to Audible books because when I then traveled with my jobs, I spent a lot of time traveling and a huge amount of time driving in the car, and I just found Audible books a really good way. If I had a 6-hour car journey, well, depending on, I can get a book in a round trip. So I just found that was a really good way for me to continue to keep up with my reading, as it were. And also too, it helped pass the time, when you're driving such long distances. It was, for me, I don't know where I would be. And at least now it's actually so affordable. It's so affordable to be able to access things to how they were before, which is really, really good. Really good.
As Delene points out in the comments, you can knit and have someone read to me. Peel me a grape, darling.
Exactly.
There have been 3 of my books, of the mainstream ones. So there's that there are no audios of, because the publishers never got around to doing them. And The Ones Who Matter Most is one of them. And I kept telling them, you have to make the audio because my readers are knitters. They all want the audio. Yeah. But not yet for all of them.
Oh, and that, and also to that one that matters, The One Who Matters Most. There's such a wonderful story. I think that would translate into Audible so incredibly well. I'm surprised they haven't done it yet.
I might do it myself at some point once that contract elapses. Glynis says, I can't get on with audible books. Glynis, I feel you. I actually can't listen to fiction audiobooks. I can't because my brain just kind of spaces out and wanders away. But I do like doing nonfiction learning type of books on audio.
Yeah, and I think it depends. Like for me, I do both. And I'll be honest with you, if I quite often will listen to Audible books when I go to bed at night. And there are times that I can spend an entire week just on one chapter.
I always wondered how that was, because I know that people use them to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then I've wondered, like, how do you know where you are? You just start the chapter over.
Yeah, and I set sleep timers as well. But I've got books that I purchased just purely because I like the narrator. And it's that narrator isn't necessarily the book itself. The content of the book may not be particularly interesting, but I really enjoy the narrator, and he's only there purely to put me to sleep. I think Chris Hemsworth is doing it now. Maybe you could talk to Chris Hemsworth, get him to read a book for you. That would be good.
I think I'd just like him to read me a book.
Yeah. So of all the characters that you've written, because I know that I need to let you go, but of all the characters that you've written, who is your favorite?
Oh, it's such
like asking you which one is your favorite child or your favorite pet.
It feels the same. There was this, so for Pack Up the Moon, which was the story that I had to put an ending on a really bad call that I took. The father character, Nolan, for some reason, there's something so soft and gentle and beautiful about him that I've never really let him out of my heart. Like if I just want to meet one person for a beer, like I think I'd want to meet Nolan and talk to him and find out how his heart was healing and all of these things. So, yeah.
Oh, it's so nice to have those characters. Well, it has been an absolute delight to catch up. Where can so for people, obviously with all the different publishers and stuff, but if people are looking for your books online, if they're reading them in digital format, where will they find them?
You'll definitely find them on Amazon in digital format. That might be the easiest. And you can always go to my website, which is just rachaelherron.com. Rachael is spelled the proper way with an A-E-L. And I know you said you might have had some questions from people too, and I still have a few minutes if we want to cover any of those.
Yep, and I'm just while I've got you there, I'm just pulling up your website, and I'm going to pop there it is, and I'm going to pop that. Can you hear my dog in the background?
Yes. I'm so glad you can't hear any of my three.
How is your dogs?
They're look at that. I just said any of my three. I only have two. I lost my border collie about a month ago, and it's been very, very sad, and I'm not over that yet. But we have, if you're watching on the video, you can see one of my little dogs sleeping right there, and then we have a bigger dog that's out in the living room. And luckily, neither of them have been barking for this, but that can't always.
That one's Dozy, isn't it?
That one's Dozy, yes. And the pit bull who looks like she's wearing a beagle costume, that's Clementine.
Yeah,
so they're doing well, and we have two cats too. We don't have kids, so that's
yeah.
fun.
So, really, come here, come and say hello to Rachel.
Oh, stop it! Who is that?
That's Renly Baratheon Bulldog. Hey.
How gorgeous. I love a bulldog.
Yeah, so he's mummy's baby, and the mastiff is left outside because he is he's 250 pounds, and he likes to, he comes in here and he's too big and he bumps the desk and he knocks things over. And I think on one of the early quarantine diaries, I've got a mannequin behind me. He sent that fly. He's a nightmare, and I can't have him in here.
Your bulldog is so beautiful. Now, can I ask you a really specific question?
Yeah.
Because we're always thinking about moving to New Zealand since I have the golden ticket of citizenship. And God knows it's bad here. But I read that you can't bring bully breeds in, any kind of pit bull or bulldog.
No, bulldogs are fine. Pit bulls, there are some restrictions around pitties, and you would need to. Is yours a purebred?
No, she's
possibly
more of a beagle. She can get away with beagle looking.
Oh, well, see, I think you would be fine, and I think a lot of it also too. I think of this, you would need to. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know that there are certain, in terms of breeding, like you're not allowed to bring American pit bulls, Dogo Argentino, and there's one other. I
think Staffordshire can't come in. I think.
Yeah. So, but. No, I said if you're dealing with a mixed breed, I think you're probably going to be fine.
Okay. The other thing is that Clementine is very old. So, and we're not moving right now, so I'm not too.
No, and I mean, and if you were to move too, I mean, just be prepared. It will cost you more to get the pets here than what it will to get anything else.
Heard that.
Yes.
with the quarantine and everything that they've always had to do, and now people have to do quarantines too.
Yeah.
By the way, congratulations on Jacinda's handling of this. She is as a leader, she is a very, very gifted leader of people, and that is something that, and particularly in a crisis, poor thing, she certainly had plenty of practice at it in the short time she's been Prime Minister. right?
Yeah, so but no, that is, I mean, if she has a superpower, that is certainly what it is in terms of leadership of the people. And the one thing she has done through this crisis is that she has deferred to experts in regards to how to sort of handle the situation that we have here. As someone who is a business owner and an entrepreneur, I am just hoping that she will follow her own advice and actually bring in those experts in terms of the economic recovery. The jury is out on that, but no, I think the entire country is pretty universal in how she herself has given 5 million people a plan and a vision, and this is where we're going to go. And even if you didn't agree with some of the decisions that were made, there was an openness there. So it's like, this is what the plan is. And to be honest with you, that's all you can ask for anybody in that situation. So there was a very, very clear idea of why it is that we're doing this, where we're going, and all of those sorts of things. So that in itself has been something that has been quite comforting. But I will be perfectly honest with you, after nearly 6 weeks, I am waiting for things because our lockdown here has been vastly more strident than it has been anywhere else in the world. And it is, we've had a few more freedoms this week, and I know lots of us have been enjoying those, but we're still a wee way off from having things, a little bit freer and being able to, like, I miss my family and all of that sort of stuff. So we've got no communication with that yet, but we're getting there. We're fingers crossed today that the numbers are still looking good and that we will be able to at least start having a little bit more freedom of movement very, very soon. So.
Every time I look at your numbers, I'm just so impressed, because you do have everything communication-wise that we don't have. We have this maniac. And
I think the situation over there too is that that whole divide between federal and local governments, state governments. So you've got essentially 50 incredibly diverse
and opinionated. They're all opinionated. I'm California, so I feel secure. Like, we are in the Bay Area, which has got a lockdown like New Zealand has, which is nothing is open except for grocery stores, and that is our essential, but everything else is closed and you can't go out. But the rest of the state is different too, and it just depends on like your county that you live in. So I hope that it all resolves quickly for the entrepreneurs like you to recover economically.
I hope so too. I mean, the one thing she will take advice. I mean, unfortunately, the unholy alliance of a coalition that she is in is not particularly business friendly or small business friendly. No, but that's okay. The thing is that we do have a situation that at least there is some dialogue, and she is where her strength has been is she will take advice from experts around her. So I am really hoping that that's what happens, and there are some good experts, and that they will really help us move forward and get our businesses up and running. And already, we're starting to see some movement in this week, and hopefully, fingers crossed, as we start moving out of this lockdown, we'll start to see businesses operating again, which will be really, 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 Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciated you taking the time to join us today. Everybody, so today's Friday. Remember, tomorrow is Pajama Party Saturday with Ethan. I'll be back here with Ethan Barclay, and we're going to talk. You will be impressed to know that Ethan and I have actually done a little bit of prep this week, and we're going to talk double stranding and all things males. So that is going to be tomorrow here on the Quarantine Diaries. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Rachel, and I will still see everybody here again tomorrow, 11 a.m. Saturday. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Marie.